So we're in a fortunate position where we are getting a lot of high intent inbound leads, but that's from that marketing, content, engagement to get them in our orbit before they come to us.
Because once you've got that relationship before they're searching, it's much easier to close them when they do.
We made a decision very early on that we were going to optimize for reach, for consumption, for sharing. About 80% of our leads are coming in inbound. Of that, about 80% is organic.
In terms of your 95% content playbook, you've obviously got the podcast.
We're the leading podcast in UX research. We're one of the top 200 technology podcasts in the United States. And that is not what we set out to do when we started it. We just wanted to try it out and see how it went.
How do you ensure that your content is something that your buyers want to consume and it's not done in a salesy way?
I did a survey of our customers and I asked them, who do you follow? What do you read? What do you wish there was more information about? What's missing in your content diet? And you put that all together and then you will have more than enough ideas to get started. You're just looking for, where do I see the strongest signal, the strongest opportunity?
Obviously the end goal is revenue, but yeah, how do you look at measuring the success of the content overall?
The North Star for us has been
Erin, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this one because we've known each other for a little bit here. We've worked together to some degree on some of the content strategies that we're going to talk about and cover today. There's obviously a lot more than what we have helped with that you all do, and you do an incredible job on, really this like organic content engine, organic content flywheel that you've been doing for years, well before it was, hey, everybody should be doing this. Like you all have been doing this, 5-6+ years at this point. And you've led the charge at User Interviews, currently as, the Senior Vice President of Marketing for that, duration and that time. And so I think we can kind of go deep here on a lot of those content strategies. So, for a little bit of context for people, just so they have, the awareness of what type of company. So User Interviews is essentially a platform that connects researchers at companies and participants or users to sort of help those companies like understand the users better, and be able to take that information and make better decisions at the company that ultimately lead to more revenue, more users, more engagement, more retention, all of that kind of stuff.
Yep.
And so that's kind of the lens of like all of the marketing that you all are doing is trying to attract, which is interesting, and we can maybe touch on it, both sides of the marketplace to some degree, I would imagine, both the participants and the companies, like the end buyers. So you're running marketing there. You also are hosting the podcast that you all have called Awkward Silences, well past 100 episodes at this point. And so you're in the probably top 0.01% of longevity and consistency of podcasts.
Yeah.
So I think, maybe to start, if we could just go over a little bit of a breakdown on like, in terms of acquisition, like just, from the highest level, customer acquisition, you've got a really strong organic, marketing-led approach to acquiring customers. But what would that breakdown be that you all have, whether it be like, between marketing-led versus sales-led, in terms of like outbound or, things like that? Like what's the breakdown of acquisition to set that context a little bit?
Yeah, if you put things on kind of a sales-led PLG, the new thing is like that kind of sales-assisted hybrid motion. We're definitely in the middle in terms of our motion, in terms of how we sell subscription packages. But we're very marketing-led in terms of our acquisition strategy. So breaking that down, about 80% of our leads are coming in inbound. Of that, about 80% is organic. So you can do the math on that. The vast majority we're talking about inbound organic in terms of where our leads are coming from. For the outbound portion, the majority of that is sales, booking opportunities on inbound leads. So even further, it's really an inbound led motion. With that being said, the vast majority of our subscriptions are closed through sales. So that's where that hybrid motion comes into play.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then when you break that apart a little bit more, in terms of like getting those inbound leads to the website, and engaging either on various pages of the website that maybe sales then can do outbound on, or actually booking a demo and a sales conversation and stuff like that. How do you look at the capturing demand side of that versus like the creating demand side of that? And obviously, if they're ending up on the website, and they're booking a demo, like they have intent at that point. But what kind of I'm curious about is like, um, uh, there are those that are actively seeking a solution, today on like bottom of funnel keywords, high intent, directories or listing sites or other things like that, where you can kind of get in front of those folks, versus like this organic playbook that we'll go through in detail, where they're not necessarily in market at this very moment, but 6 months later, if they have that pain or that problem, or they're like, oh, actually I could use this, you've already built that trust with them and that relationship. So then you're on that short list and they come straight to you. So how do you think about that, like, difference, or the differences in those approaches?
Yeah, I think, you're always recalibrating where you're putting your energy in terms of demand generation and demand capture, and that matches where the market is, where your business is, and, it's really triangulating your various signals on where you should be focused. We're at a stage now where we have a team, it's basically a third product marketing, a third growth marketing, and then a third content and community, with one person focused on that participant side of the marketplace. And the
Yep.
nice thing about that setup is we're able to really flex across demand gen and demand capture depending on what our numbers or conversion rates the market is telling us that we need to focus on. But to answer your question, when we think about the inbound leads coming in, a slight majority are coming in to either sign up or raise their hand and ask for a demo. But with that being said, those folks who are showing some intent, who are more in a buying or using the product readiness stage, they've heard of us before, right? So we've done marketing, content, engagement to get them in our orbit before they come to us. So we're in a fortunate position where we are getting a lot of high intent inbound leads, but that's from that work we've done to generate that demand before.
Because it sounds like there is some market demand for a solution like user interviews out there, like actively seeking, because there are some categories where it's like you're almost kind of creating a category a little bit, and like really nobody's going to Google and typing in like, I'm looking for a solution like that. So really it's pretty much almost entirely creating demand. So it sounds like you've got both, and it's important for you. It sounds like you're focused on like, well, let's make sure we capture what's out there, because like that's a no-brainer. We don't want to
Right.
we don't want to like
Leave
just be
money on
so
the table.
focused on creating
Yeah.
content
Yeah.
and
Right.
like not being in front of the people who are literally today looking for the solution.
That's right.
But then also not being overly weighted on that side, to where now you're not getting in front of buyers before they're searching, because once you've got that relationship before they're searching, it's much easier to close them when they do.
That's right. I think about the bottom of funnel as really building that engine. And that's the first thing I did when I started almost 7 years ago. I was the first
Yep.
marketer. It was just me. So the first things I did were, look at branded and unbranded, high intent keywords on Google Ads, because that was going to be quick and it was going to be high ROI. So we did that. We got that machine going. Then the next thing we did was build out email nurtures to look at people who had tried the product and not come back, who had signed up but not used the product, just get some of those basic kind of nurture set up. So once you have that machine going, okay, now let's go build some demand, right? So that was kind of the order operations.
I think that sequencing makes so much sense. And I think like on LinkedIn, it's easy to have people feel like they're in these camps of like SEO, keyword driven, paid lead gen still works. That's the religion. Or like pure organic, create demand, like that's the religion. The real answer is like both of these need to work
Oh,
together.
100%. Absolutely. You got to do what works. There's no place for dogma in marketing. I have beliefs. I have beliefs based on
Yep.
data and experience, but you got to do what works at the end of the day.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. So speaking of that, then, like, could we go through a little bit of what your content playbook is? So, like, obviously, the focus of this show um, is that 5% in market that is actively searching for a solution is very important. There's a lot of other places that cover like how to get in front of them and how to win them. This show is focused on the 95% who are out of market because I think there's far less content around that, and it's really valuable to start doing those kind of strategies today. So yeah, in terms of your 95% quote unquote content playbook, like you've obviously got the podcast, and maybe we can just go through like what those are and how you think about the prioritization and effectiveness of them.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll say the 95%, it's the fun part, and it's the part that's not going to be replaced by AI, right? It's the human part, it's the creative part. I think it's the part that's going to be it's going to evolve, but it's going to be the part that's here to stay. So we're doing a lot of things now. I've got, on the content community team, we've got a content community director. We have a creative projects director who's kind of like our editor at large, who just does fun, interesting things, which is a really cool role. We have a community and events manager, and then we have a content marketing manager who does a variety of formats and content. And what that team is able, and then we have partners like you helping us with our podcast. So we have a podcast that we publish every 2 weeks, which we have done very consistently for 6 years, for a long time. We're the leading podcast in UX research. We're one of the top 200 technology podcasts in the United States. And that is not what we set out to do when we started it. We just wanted to try it out and see how it went. So, if I were to have any advice for anybody, it's just take the first step, and then probably take the second or third. Don't give up before it's had a chance. But you don't know. You don't know what's going to kind of work out in the end. So we have our podcast. We're, of course, doing video now, which we weren't always doing with the podcast. And then we're able to use that video as a huge part of our content creation strategy across now TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and LinkedIn. So in addition to the podcast platforms, we're really full channel, full audio, written, visual. So that's been an amazing opportunity that we didn't see when we started 6 years ago. So that's really evolved for us.
Yeah, and that podcast piece being the pillar for that. And then do you have any other platform specific strategies? So you've got the podcast piece, but I'd imagine that the podcast is powering some of the content on those channels, but not all of it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So that's just one piece. So we certainly have a blog. We're publishing in the blog about once a week, give or take. And those tend to be more opinion oriented. They're things that benefit from a long kind of written format. We're embedding images, trying to keep them interesting. Because of AI and how easy it is for AI to just do like sort of explain our content, we're not doing that. We're doing something that has something to say and to contribute. So we're doing that about once a week. We have a field guide that's an evergreen resource of really how to do user research. And it's meant to both be approachable for someone who really doesn't know what they're doing, who's very new to user research, or someone who's an experienced researcher, but maybe wants to brush up on diary studies or a particular method. And it's very sort of structured and organized, and you can find what you're looking for and use that as a resource. So I've had that for a long time. We keep updating it.
Is that an opt-in to like your new, as like a opt-in to your newsletter, or it's kind of used in that way for CTAs and stuff like that?
Yeah, exactly. We structured it as, I think we were calling it, an e-course in the beginning. And so you can sign up and get it delivered to you module by module, chapter by chapter. There's some customization you can choose, but very much an email capture. Email optional. This is a big belief of mine. We don't require it, but if you would like to provide your email and get it as an email course, you're able to do that.
Interesting. Okay. So they could download it on the site and kind of go through it there without putting in the email. And it's sort of like choose your own adventure.
Yep, exactly. And I think, you're always exchanging sort of reach for email capture when you make those decisions. And I made a decision very early on that we were going to optimize for reach. And
Right. For
that's
consumption rather
mhm,
than gating it.
exactly for
Yep.
consumption, for sharing, for SEO exposure, et cetera, et cetera.
Super smart. And then do you have any other like sort of, and then we can go through more specifics of each of these, but just to get a lay of the land, um, do you have any other sort of like video at the center pillars, or, whether it's like webinar or, YouTube,
Yeah,
things like that?
webinars. Webinars, we do webinars. We're actually going to be releasing a webinar series in September, so stay tuned for
Cool.
that. But they've been kind of monthly webinars that we've done for quite a while now. And then, of course, we offer those on demand and we put them on YouTube and break them into clips and things like that. We also launched our first course. This was a month ago. This was a 4-week, 1 hour a week cohorted course that we had led by an instructor who very much knew her stuff. We had over 2,500 people sign up for it, so it was very successful for us. And I would say kind of the approach to all of this has been, where is there a need? Where is there a gap in the market? How can we figure out how to deliver something that meets the need? That's, kind of the basic approach. And the course was one of many things that fell into that approach.
That's really cool, especially the cohort nature, which I think like helps with the engagement of courses. Cause like obviously historically, like the actual follow through of like course participants is a lot of times can be really low. Like making it through, those on demand async courses like that. So the cohort based, I think like probably helped a lot with that.
Yeah, we thought about charging for it just to have the skin in the game aspect of it. And in fact, one of the early signals when we were kind of teasing this out, is there demand for this? Is there interest? Was everyone said how much, which to me was a great signal that people wanted to sign up for this.
That's incredible. That's obviously one of the bars that I think is a good lens to look at is like, would somebody pay for this content? And that's obviously very subjective and it's like easy to kind of say, but when getting actual feedback like that is actually directly showing you that like that is the case in this case. And it's like, okay, we need to double down on that, which, obviously you all did.
I'll say also, the first thing I did when kind of building out our content strategy was true to our brand, talk to customers and try to understand them, try to understand the market, both in terms of what topics do they care about, what are their pain points, what's keeping them up at night, right? What's stressful for them, etc. But also where are their gaps, what kind of formats, where should we be distributing, all of that. So we did a lot of work to understand that. And by a lot of work, I mean, this took a week, right? It doesn't have to be a multi-month process. But you do your research up front and you end up with a lot of confidence that you're going in the right direction, right? You're going to learn and you're going to iterate as you go, but you're not just throwing stuff at the wall. You've done some research. It's like, no, like people care about this. This article doesn't exist anywhere yet. I can create it. It's going to be good. People are going to read it. So I think there's that too, where we are putting it out there and seeing how it does. And sometimes you get surprised, but usually we don't get that surprised because we put some thought into it to begin with.
This is such an important point that like you are the absolute perfect person to talk to about this because like obviously the nature of user interviews and then you all are sort of dog fooding that with your content strategy. I see so many teams overlook this step and whether it's intentional or just, it's just they don't have perceived time for it or whatever the case may be. It's so often it's like, here's the idea that we have, let's go do it. And there's like no validation of it. And we obviously really strongly recommend, audience research and competitive research. But I would love to hear your how you kind of practically or tactically how you approach that, because I think when people hear that, they think, oh, I got to go spend 300 hours, doing this. And like, in the end, I really am just going to have to make a judgment call on it anyway. So might as well do that now.
Right.
And we don't have the time. So you did this in a week or less.
Yeah.
what was your process for it, or your process for it, now on any new things you're
Yeah,
doing?
yeah. So it's changed, but just to get that, if I were starting cold in a new content role right at a company, I would talk to people internally. I would talk to sales. I would talk to support. You could put together a simple Google form. You can Slack them, whatever works. But you just want to get a sense of what are customers and prospects coming to us talking about all the time? What are they stressed out about? What do they not understand about our product? What do they not understand about how to do their jobs, about something adjacent to the product? You just want to get a sense of what are the themes that are coming up, right? And then you need to understand, like, who are they? What do they care about? Right? What's their kind of, how do they go through the world? You can do a lot of desk research. It's very easy now with things like SparkToro, or BuzzSumo. There's other tools where you're doing audience research to understand this is who I'm trying to reach. What are their spheres of influence? Who are they listening to? Again, you can get some topic ideas that way. I did a survey of our customers, of our existing customers. We had the advantage of having some. And I asked them, right? This isn't rocket science. Like, just ask the people. I'm fortunate that our customers and audience have been very willing and enthusiastic participants of our content and marketing. That's not always the case if you're working with software engineers or whatever. But in our case, it's not hard to get people to interact with things like that. So I just did a simple survey and I asked them like the same questions. Who do you follow? What do you read? What do you wish there was more information about? What's missing in your content diet? And you put that all together and then you will have more than enough ideas to get started. You're just looking for, where do I see the strongest signal, the strongest opportunity?
And I would say too, if you don't feel like you have the ability to go sort of with a semi-warm outreach to customers with a form to fill out because the engagement may not be that high, literally doing what you exactly just described with the internal process, everybody can do that internally. But I would say the amount of value you would get from even just getting 3 to 5 calls
Oh, 100%.
with customers,
Yeah.
and literally that's it, just 3 to 5, and try to kind of pick like a variety, like somewhat different personas if you can, who are, so you can get a little bit of that full spectrum view if you've got folks that have different makeups of your customers. But even just the subjective, qualitative information you get on those calls, and then you can hear something interesting, double down with another follow-up on it. You are 100% going to come out of that with some new way you think about your content strategy that you didn't going into it. We see it every single time that happens.
100%. And for folks who don't do a lot of qualitative research or talking to customers, you're not looking for statistical significance. You're looking for some trends. You're looking for, this seems to be something that is striking an emotional chord. There's something here that people care about. This is something I want to focus on.
And where that wedge is that you can fill the need that, is not being met. And even if that need is being met technically, like let's say there's another 10, 20 other podcasts out there that are somewhat similar category. Really what you're looking for is how much do we need to differentiate. Doesn't mean you need to avoid that category. It's just, either are they doing a job we can do a better job at and literally just do the same thing, but just execute better, or just do we need to slightly differentiate the positioning of the topics and the format and how we cover it and all of that stuff.
Yeah, differentiation is everything. And especially if you're in a crowded medium, a crowded market, like whatever it might be. If it's first to market, there's less need. But even then, you got to have a reason for being, right? You got to have some kind of, what is this thing? Why should people listen to it? And I would say that's probably the thing I say to the team more than anything is just, why does anyone care about this? Why do our customers care about this? Why do users care about this? Like, you think it's a good idea and that's great, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what I think or you think or the CEO thinks or the head of the board thinks or anybody else. What matters is, did our customers get value from this? Will they read it? Will they share it? Will they like it? Will it help them do their jobs? And I think that's always the litmus test for content is who cares among who we're trying to reach and why do they care?
Yes. And it's hard to figure that out without trying to actively seek, or hopefully get that feedback from them.
100%. Sometimes you know from research up front. Sometimes you learn when you put it out in the market, and
Exactly.
either way is okay. But it's a learning process, and it's something you always want to be thinking about.
Totally. Okay, cool. So you've got, essentially you've got the podcast, content engine that then, goes out to the various social platforms, which you're executing a lot of social platforms compared to, more in the B2B space type companies. The newsletter, the webinar strategy, the blog strategy. How would you say, you quantify the size of your audience right now? And like the trends of that, or do you have sort of goals that you're looking for when it comes to, hey, we want to grow followers or subscribers? Obviously the end goal is revenue.
Yeah.
But yeah, how do you look at like what you're measuring, where things are with the audience currently, and then how you're measuring the success of the content overall?
Yeah, so you're exactly right. We're looking at pipeline and revenue or the North Star. And when we're thinking about creating demand, we're not thinking about pipeline. We're thinking about what can we do today to generate pipeline, hopefully tomorrow, but maybe in 3 months or a year, whatever it might be. And so the North Star for us has been content uniques or content sessions for a long time. We're looking at how many people can we get to the website looking at our content, with the idea being that we're putting out stuff that is targeted at our ICP, at our audience. And the people that are going to read this stuff are probably mostly the people we want to reach, right? So not perfect attribution by any means, but there's a strategy there. That's worked well for us for a really long time, because what we would see is as content sessions would move up and to the right, so would pipeline. Who needs more attribution? Everything's working how it's supposed to be. That came into a little bit of a challenge in the last couple of years when the market went a little bit sideways. And so we started to think about attribution more. And we also started to think about other sort of leading indicators supporting the work we're doing on content that are modern and reflect the work we're doing. So it's not just content sessions now. Now we're looking at social media engagement, YouTube plays, right? We're looking at new leads we're generating from webinars. We're looking at ICP folks who are joining webinars. So we do have a broader constellation of metrics that we're following that map to the various funnel stages and the various types of work we're doing across content and community. But certainly we're still looking at those content sessions. It does help to get people to the website.
I think it's helpful to look at it that way in both those buckets, because in an ideal world, the consumption and engagement that's happening in platform, in podcast platform, in YouTube, in LinkedIn is a leading indicator for the pipeline and revenue, or getting those content sessions on the website as well. So like, the big piece of creating demand obviously is like to create the demand. It's not just the awareness, or we've got a lot of impressions on LinkedIn, but it's gone up the last 6 months, but we're not seeing any correlation, either with self-reported or just trend lines on pipeline and revenue and stuff like that. So how do you bake that into your content? Like, how do you ensure that your content is, something that your buyers want to consume, and it's not done in a, of course, like salesy way, but it does bridge that gap in their mind of the problem you solve, and that you are a leader in the market for that problem?
Yeah. Yeah. So, you're always looking for that intersection of what do they care about? What does my business care about? Where do these things intersect, right?
Yep.
And so that'll change over time. So on the what do they care about front, we're thinking about the zeitgeist. We're thinking about what's going on in our case with user researchers right now. So in the case of user researchers, it's been a tough market for them. Their jobs have changed. It's starting to grow back in terms of hiring, which is fantastic. But what is the nature of this job? How do I measure the success of my job? How do I show the ROI of my job? These are the kinds of questions on their mind. So our content's going to address that. Fortunately, we can connect that with the value that we're offering as a product. We can save them time. We can save them money. We can help them scale themselves in the research that we're doing. So there's a nice overlap there. So I think, in terms of the content we're putting out, we're thinking about it that way. And then we're also thinking about where in the funnel do we need to be? If the market is not a high purchase market right now, maybe we're going to focus on the top of the funnel and really build that demand for tomorrow. So I think we're thinking about it both topically and then in terms of, where in the funnel do we want to focus?
Do you plug, how often are you, or how are you, if at all, plugging the company in any of the content?
Yeah, good question. Always, but subtly. And I think it might be as simple as just making sure our logo is on our charts, right? So one of the content types that's been very important to us that we didn't talk about is that we invest a lot in what we call internally big bets, and we've started to call bangers. So these are high effort, high impact pieces of content. It might be our user research tools map, which has become sort of famous in the industry. It might be, state of user research report. To your point, everyone under the sun does a state of whatever industry report. We did not come up with this idea. Our idea was to do it well, to do it better than we needed to do it, right? And to be the defining report in the user research industry for this report, which we have done. So we do things like that. And back to the point, there'll be charts in them that we, of course, want people to share and talk about on social media. So we'll have a logo. We're trying to not shove what we are and what we do down people's throats. That's not the point of content marketing, but we don't want to miss opportunities either to say, brought to you by user interviews. By the way, this is what we do. So, it's our job to make sure that that isn't lost. But I think we're pretty subtle and respectful with how we do it.
Totally, because there's two ways to approach it, and it depends on how it's being distributed. If it's being distributed from the company accounts, then it might be a little bit different, and it might be a little bit more of that, like, ensuring that the awareness is there of the company logo, the company, user interviews is the company that brought this to you, essentially. But then you've also got, the personality-led approach, these days too, which I think is a little bit easier to have, expertise of that person becoming a thought leader in the industry, and then as such creating that demand for the company through that person. So how do you all think about the personalities at the company on, like, let's say, you mentioned you're on TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube. Who is posting? Like, are those all the company accounts, and do you have individuals, as the face of those company accounts, or are these on both individual accounts as well?
Yeah, I would say we skew actually more company-led, which I think, the smart money and the conventional wisdom is on individual people being more effective. And I think that's probably right. I think also you got to play to your company's advantages and where it is. And so we don't necessarily have hundreds of people raising their hand trying to be thought leaders in that way. And that's okay. So we've really invested in the company account on LinkedIn, for example, and making sure it is number one versus any of our competitors in terms of the engagement that we're driving from that account. Of course, we are resharing and amplifying those posts from individuals, we have lots of folks who will like and share and comment, but in terms of folks who are actively working on building a really robust following, that would not be our secret sauce at this stage, I wouldn't say.
Totally. And your LinkedIn account, the company account is super impressive. You built that to 60,000 followers. So is there any other aspects of that specific platform, for example, that you think is, important for your execution on it? Or, how have you built it to 60,000, and like, how do you think about the use case of it, essentially?
Yeah, for sure. I think that consistency and volume is really important with social in a way that it isn't necessarily as important with other formats where it can kind of do high quality, low quantity. So having a consistent schedule. We saw when we were posting less because we weren't sure, is this really valuable? Is this the best use of our time? Guess what? Engagement went down. So that's part of it, is a volume and a consistent schedule. And then, of course, the other part of it is quality. Are you posting stuff people care about? And so we have a nice mix. We do some bottom of funnel stuff talking about our product. To your point, like we have found that we have pretty good market penetration relative to our size and the size of the market. So we want to make sure that that market understands who we are and what we do. And so we do use some of our posts to establish that. And then, of course, we're promoting our content, but trying to do it in natively smart ways, right? So that zero-click content where you don't have to click anywhere to get the value from the post, but we're getting those same ideas out there again and again across channels, whether it be from our State of User Research report or anything else, a podcast, et cetera. And certainly those short form videos have been huge for driving engagement on LinkedIn. Those always do amazingly well.
Yeah, and help with not that zero click approach, obviously there too. It's like, the short form audience on social isn't usually or always the same as the long form audience in podcast or YouTube. And so if you don't have one or the other, you're actually losing your ability to build affinity with a huge amount of people who just prefer to consume content in whatever way they prefer, but you're not, providing that to them. And so doing both is like, like let's say you go into your podcast analytics for the long form show, you've actually got a shadow audience on LinkedIn who consumes the show that doesn't show up in those analytics, but they actually are consuming the show. So yeah, that's cool. And then I'd imagine LinkedIn for social started first and was like the main channel, for a while, and probably even still today from a social aspect. Is TikTok and Instagram like a new thing you all have started as like, hey, let's make sure we're here too because we want to test out is it testing phase, or have you found like those are really strong social platforms for you all as well?
Yeah, so I would say that YouTube, we've been on YouTube for forever, but not in any sort of strategic way, right? It's like we have the videos, let's put them on YouTube, number 2 search engine.
Yep.
We write the transcriptions and link them back to our site. We've got some best practices going on, but not super strategic or a priority in our approach there. But it's growing, and it's growing in a large part due to our shorts and due to our consistency and our volume of content. Instagram, similar story, except we started that later on. It's growing. So that's kind of what we're doing is I know you don't want to be overly spread in terms of where you're spending your efforts, but it's also, we've got these videos. We might as well put them on these platforms and see what happens. So that's kind of where we are with Instagram and YouTube. And what's happening is that they're growing. And so that will be an area we'll continue to invest. TikTok is very new, but we've had phenomenal success on the participant side of our marketplace with TikTok. It's one of our top acquisition channels, both from influencer and word of mouth.
Yeah, that makes sense for that side of the marketplace to have a lot of reach on a platform like TikTok.
Yeah, but we are seeing people come in from our, how did you hear about us forms on the researcher side from TikTok as well. So an interesting kind of side effect of our marketplace is that a lot of the folks we're trying to reach on the participant side are working professionals. Some of them can be customers on the researcher side. So you do get this interesting kind of cross-pollination happening, but we're pretty interested in continuing to test TikTok more on the researcher side as well. I hear B2B TikTok is working really well for some folks.
Yeah, and it's not super competitive. I mean, there's not like, not the same competition as trying to rank on the first page of Google for all the other, people in the market who everybody's pretty much doing that. Whereas on TikTok, I would guess probably across almost all B2B categories, 97% of the competitors are not on TikTok.
Yeah. And what a fun opportunity to just be an oddball, I think like have a little fun. People need that. And I think, obviously it depends on the B2B, industry you're in and your audience. But with ours, they're academic, but they're deeply interested in humanity and humans. So I think a fun opportunity to have some fun.
So you mentioned seeing, through that attribution, which I'm assuming is like self-reported attribution. Yeah, on your sign up form, that TikTok, you were seeing that. Of all the content pillars you've got, would you say that there's one or two that you're seeing most often as like driving that sort of result as like, okay. And I know it's hard because the podcast also like feeds a lot of it, it sounds like. But yeah, I'm just curious which one you're seeing the most, if you would say is having the most success for you in whatever way you look at that.
Yeah, all of it's having some amount of success, or we would drop it, like I mentioned before. The self-reported attribution is tough. I'm curious how it's going for you. We do get some signal there, and we haven't been doing it for a long time. It works great on the participant side because we have so much volume. The signal is very clear. On the researcher side, obviously, we have less volume, B2B, but most people say Google. And I know that they didn't hear about us from Google. Yeah. So, we're thinking, can we reword the question? We get better signal actually from our tech stack in terms of someone might say they heard about us from Google, but we can see that the first page that they saw was a content page. So maybe they Googled that page, maybe they didn't, but they didn't hear about us from Google. They heard about us from our content. So attribution is always a work in progress. I'll say qualitatively the things that I hear the most, and that is very important, especially early on, but even still for some of the newer channels, the things I hear about the most are those data reports, those big bets, that tools map that we do, the state of user research, these things that we put a lot of energy into, and the podcast. Certainly did not start the podcast for my own niche fame. But, going to industry events, it's been a funny kind of kick for people to come up to me and be like, I know your voice. and that's been validating, not of me, but of the podcast, right? That this is reaching the people we're trying to reach. And you don't see that in any of the data that we have. You see that when you go out and talk to people. And we also see it, we get lots of Slack kind of feedback of people on sales calls. So-and-so, super high up buyer from a big Fortune 100 company just told us that they love your podcast and they've listened to every episode. That's all the validation you need to kind of keep going.
I mean, literally that's implying they have spent, dozens and dozens, if not hundreds of hours with you building that relationship prior to, engaging with sales. We see that so much with the most successful, specifically for podcast strategies, when the host goes to an in-person event or conference. When at any time it is working, that person will get recognized with no sort of introduction that they've done themselves. And it just implies, like, if that's happening in person, that being actually what's happening behind the scenes, but just people aren't reaching out, after they're listening or whatever, but they're being impacted in the same way. So you can put a multiplier on that for sure. I think your content playbook, your 95% content playbook, is being done extremely well. And I'm curious, like, is there any company or companies or individuals that you study to know, like, hey, we should experiment with this next, or like, I'm getting inspired by what they're doing? Like, who are you studying right now that you think's doing a great job?
Yeah, I'm inspired constantly, like by B2B, by not B2B, by even not marketing, right? We're doing content, so anything's fair game in terms of inspiration.
Yep.
So I'm equally, on the one hand, inspired by things, and on the other hand, very, very dedicated to not copying others. It's like, we got to do our own thing. We got to do what makes sense for our audience. But I'll just mention one that, Market One, MKT One, are you familiar with them? I think that content's been really helpful for me. And I think a lot of it has been content I feel I could have written if I'd sat down to do it, but I didn't. And so I'm glad someone else did. You know what I mean? It's really like, yes, I agree with this. Thank you for writing it down and creating these beautiful frameworks that I can share with my team. You have saved me a lot of time. But what I appreciate about it is that it is very structured. Clearly, Emily Kramer came in with maybe not the outline of a 3-year plan, but like, this is going to be the content calendar for the first year. These are the building blocks. We're going to start here. And you really get a structured approach to building a B2B SaaS team in the early stages. And it's always good to, compare what you're doing to what someone else is doing who's been there before. And she knows what she's talking about. I think, you read content marketing where it's written by a junior level content marketer who didn't take the time to interview anybody and just Googled a couple other articles. Like that doesn't cut it with anybody anymore. So, the fact that it's written by somebody who knows what they're talking about, and the multimedia thing, right? Started with a newsletter, started with a blog. Now there's podcasts, webinar appearances, courses. So I think you start with the one thing, you start with the building blocks, and then you scale up from there. So I think that content's been really top tier as one example.
Agreed. Yeah, I'm a fan of their work as well. And yeah, I think the junior person regurgitating 10 other articles they found is honestly at this point like a net negative. Like it's not even neutral.
Right.
It actually kind of just hurts the brand. And like, an executive who you've got the attention of, but then now that's the content you've put in front of them. It's a huge missed opportunity versus
Absolutely.
like that expert-led approach. The other thing I thought was really interesting, which is what the goal of I think content can be a lot of times, is what you did, what you mentioned that you shared the Market One content with your team internally. And that's something that they can't see. So that's the concept of, dark social, essentially. It's like, I've grabbed this piece of content and now I've shared it in Slack with my team of 5, 10 other people. And we're all being influenced by it and building, trust with them, but they can't see that. So now when one of those team members goes to Google and types in Market One, like you mentioned earlier, it looks like they're coming through Google, but really it was found by somebody. It was shared in Slack. That person, wanted to get to the website, so they Google it. And then maybe when they, are asked an attribution, how did you get to this website? They're like, oh, well, I got to it through Google, whatever. So I think that, that content-based sort of like referral and shareability is really, really, really powerful. So like that lens again of like, how can we create content so good that number one, they would want to pay for, or number two, they will share this as a framework with the rest of their team.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. The data is so imperfect with all of this, but you got to embrace that. I think that's like the first thing. You're just not going to get perfect data. So let go of that. You just need enough signal to keep going and to know where to focus. And again, if the pipeline's there, you're good. We've seen with the 0-click stuff, right? We're not going to, of course, get clicks coming from LinkedIn all the time because that's not the point, but we'll see spikes in direct, right? We have increased engagement in LinkedIn, and now we have more direct traffic. That's your dark social showing up.
Exactly. It's more directional. Like, yeah. So, okay, cool. Is there anything you think we didn't cover that like you're super excited about just in general around like the future of B2B content specifically? Because I think it's a really fun time to be in for B2B content. And yeah, I'm curious, like any trends, any future things you're excited about, where it's all going, or anything at all?
So I didn't start in marketing. I ended up in marketing, but I've always done content in some form my whole career. And that's because it keeps being interesting, whether it's different formats, whether it's content changing, whether it's different topics, whatever it is. And so I am excited for the future. I know we've been through every pendulum swing of content is king, content is dead, no, it's queen, whatever. But I think that in B2B, content will always be king. I just don't see that not being true. And the reason is you got to break through to your customers and you got to provide value to do that. And outbound has gotten, oh my gosh, so noisy with AI, and I'll leave that to someone else to figure out the future of that. But content's going to be part of it. Now, what that content looks like is obviously going to change and has changed so much in just my time here at User Interviews. But I think it will be increasingly the short form, the video, the audio, the social driven, the no click, I think that will continue. There will be a new social platform that will take off that we don't know what it is right now, I'm sure, in 2 years, right? Maybe TikTok will be banned. Who knows? It will change. But at the same time, opposite trends are always happening in parallel. And I don't think long form is going away either. So our rich, meaty long form data reports are going to have a place. It's just that we're also going to modify them to be appropriate for those short form, more, audiovisual channels too. So I think that's kind of where we are right now. But I'm sure it will evolve.
Yeah, it's fun. That's what makes it fun. To your point, it's like that's kind of where all the alpha is in this, is like, studying and paying attention to what's going on and being able to get on top of, new strategies, new ways to create content that nobody else has adopted yet, that you're competing with, and you can win there. And it's just the way that the habits of people consuming content has evolved in general in the world over the last 10 years. And there's no reason B2B buyers, who are humans in the world, are going to act differently in the way that they want to consume content at work versus at home. What platforms they do it and their reason for doing it will be different, but the ways in which it's delivered to them and how they consume it won't.
Yeah, have something interesting to say, have something valuable to say. That's those basics. That's what's exciting about marketing right now, is I think we're returning to some important fundamentals. We all got caught up in just like data. And it's, I think the humanity is coming back with AI and with this need to really break through and connect. So that's something I'm very excited about. And obviously content is a big part of that.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Erin. You all are absolutely killing it. It's fun to watch. I would recommend anybody who wants to see all this in action to check out the user interviews, social platforms, and also the Awkward Silences podcast. Is there anywhere else you would recommend, if anybody wants to just connect with you or follow along, your work anywhere in particular you think is best to do that?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm decently active there. So look me up on LinkedIn. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you again.
Awesome. Thanks, Erik.